Welcome everybody to the Equal Opportunities Committee, the fourth meeting of 2014. Can you set off your electronic devices to flight mode or off, please, for your phones? Today's only agenda item is an evidence session on our fathers in parenting inquiry. And we'll start the session by some introductions. So at the table we have our clerk and research team, the official reporters and the broadcasting services. And around the room we're supported by security, and I see we've also got some observers in our public gallery, and welcome to you too. My name is Margaret McCulloch and I'm the committee's convener. And I'm now going to invite members and witnesses to introduce themselves in turn, starting here on my right.
I'm Alan Reddick, I'm 13, I've got 2 kids, I'm from Hamilton.
I'm Christian Allard and I'm MSP for the North East of Scotland.
Alec Johnson, also a member from North East Scotland.
Morning, John for the MSP Highlands and Islands.
Kenny Drysdale, father. I've got 3 children, aged 8, 6 and going to be 4 this month.
Peter McGee, father of 1, 18 months.
John Mason, I'm the MSP for Glasgow Shettleston.
Victor Quested, I'm a father of 2 children, 6 and 5.
Norman Fraser from Hamilton, I'm a father of 3 children, wife's expecting in April, so hopefully before soon.
Good morning, Alan Kidd, father of identical twin girls at 23 months, and I have a stepson also who's 12.
Marco Biaggi, Deputy Convener of the Committee and MSP for Edinburgh Central.
Thank you, everybody. Can I also ask the witnesses if and when you would like to speak, if you could indicate to myself or the clerking team, we'll then take you in turns, okay? I'll start the sort of first question off, and if anybody would like to answer, if you can just indicate. How was decisions about paternity leave and also primary care were actually made when you had the children? And was it automatically assumed that the child or the children's mother would actually take full paternity leave, or did any witnesses consider using additional paternity leave as well? Okay, Alan.
When my first child was born, it was automatically assumed that my wife would take full maternity leave, and I was actively encouraged to take my paternity leave during the school holidays, so it wouldn't actually impact on my work. And the same happened when my second child was born. I was actively encouraged to take my paternity leave, my 2 weeks, during the Easter holidays.
Okay, thank you. Alan?
The agency that I work for had no enhanced rates at all for paternity leave, and therefore, as my wife, because she was expecting twins, was off work much longer before they arrived, and she was down to statutory maternity pay at that point. Therefore, I took annual leave from work for 3 weeks from my own entitlement, so that the same level of income was coming into the household at that particular time. So I took no paternity leave, because although it was available, it wasn't affordable.
Would any other witnesses like to say? Kenny?
I've had paternity's been with different employers, but I've not had problems getting paternity off, but I took paternity and holidays because it does have financial implication. If you're off for 2 weeks, it makes a big difference.
Did you find that with being with different employers at different times for your paternity leave, was there different attitudes towards you taking time off?
No, they were really supportive in both. Never had, as far as the time off, it's not been a problem.
Excellent, okay. Anybody else? No. Marco, yes.
And other people in your workplace in similar situations, have they made the same choices as you in the employer? Yeah. Okay.
If childcare had been more affordable, do you think there would have been different decisions made at that point in time? Alan?
Again, when my first daughter was born, we put her into nursery, into childcare, but it became too expensive, and my wife ended up having to quit her job and go to weekend working only. So I think, had there been affordable childcare, then probably we would have split the paternity between the 2 of us. Certainly, I feel I missed out, especially, I don't know if it's just the job I'm in, but I was encouraged not to take as much as I probably should have because I'm a teacher.
Anybody? Yes, Alan.
Because we had twins, obviously childcare is much more expensive. The nursery that we chose for our girls, because my wife went back to work 2 days a week, a Sunday when I was off and a Monday, where we had to pay for a nursery placement. At one half day per week costs us over £200 a month for our 2 daughters. If we had to decide to put them in 5 days a week, it would have cost us £1,400 a month, and which is more than my wife earned in a full-time position that she was in. And clearly the affordability of that was not a question. There's no way we could have afforded that.
Peter and then Kenny.
Yeah, similar to what Alan was saying. My wife and I both work full time, but my wife's wage would have been going totally on the childcare costs, so we cannot survive without Granny, and I think that's got to be noted.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we'd agreed to the first child that my wife didn't want to work, didn't have to work, so spend time with the child. The second one comes along, I'm afraid financially it would be non-viable anyway.
Do you feel that because of those circumstances you may have missed out on the opportunity to spend more care with the children when they were younger? Anybody would like to answer that? Yes, Alan.
I would say no. My employer, although there was no financial provision for enhanced paternity rates, that my employer recognised that my wife giving birth to twins was a huge deal, and the managing director, who is my direct line manager, was more than flexible and accommodating, and take whatever time you need, come in late, go home early. If there's an issue at home, the kids are not well or your wife needs support, then you just go home. So besides the paternity rates being very poor, the flexibility was great.
Excellent. Okay. Alan.
I had the exact opposite experience. My employer just would not let me away for anything. I've missed my youngest daughter. I missed her first day at nursery. I've missed every nativity that she's done. I miss everything. Mm-hmm. And I do feel that my wife gets a much more one-to-one time with the kids than what I do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a shame. Alex.
I was just going to ask, the contrast of the two Allans there, that their experiences seem to be rather opposite in some respects. And I wonder if we could dig just a wee bit deeper. I don't want to know who your employers are, but are we looking at a difference between a public and a private sector experience, or am I...
Yeah, I work for a third sector, not-for-profit agency.
Education, so.
Does anybody else feel that the type of employer characterises the way you're treated, or is it a bit more random than that?
I would say, yeah, there's big contrasts in what access you've got or how you're able to attend key events as far as your family's concerned, going with the employer. I think there's a... But sometimes it's the job you're actually doing yourself. I've worked in health and social care, so you've got responsibilities for the people you're supporting at the time. So you might work one Christmas on, one Christmas off, but there is big differences.
Peter?
Similar to Alan, I also work for a third sector organisation, and I think because of the people that we are working with, we know the situations that sort of hectic families can have. My wife works for a private sector, and she finds it very difficult even taking holiday time. So I'm very fortunate that I can have that flexibility while my wife doesn't have it.
Alan?
I was just going to make the point, convener, if it's possible, just to say that I think maybe the situation would have been different if we didn't have twins, and that lots of the situations or going to things requires two people, particularly when they're babies, because you don't know what they're going to be like when you get to that situation. I think my employer was very much tuned into that and supported that, although there are other colleagues at work who have children and they also get access to go to various events, but I think maybe I was shown a bit more discrepancy in those cases.
So, anybody else? John?
Could I just ask on that point? I mean, I don't know how long you've been working. You don't need to tell us your age or anything, but do you think it's changed over time? I mean, has attitudes changed? Do you think it is a bit more friendly towards fathers now?
Yeah, I mean, I've worked for the same organisation for 16 years now, and I think certainly when I first joined that organisation, when people had children or needed away for things, it was very much, oh no, we can't do that, we can't possibly manage that. But I think over time there is a difference in in people's, or certainly the directors or the managers of the organisation, looking at we actually need to support our young fathers or mothers because they, do a lot for this organisation. It's a 24/7 operation that we have. It's a residential school and a fostering service, and so they're in tune with what happens to children and young people. But I think, like other situations, it's, there's people out of their homes during the night and every day of the week, really. So I think as a payback, they have certainly decided that they can be a bit more flexible with people over the years.
Yeah, can I just ask, does anybody here any of the witnesses working in a private sector organisation? Or are you all public or third sector?
I have worked in a private sector before. It was a charitable organisation.
Okay. But we've got mostly public. Right. The question I was really wanting to ask on this area was, you're here because you have taken an involvement. You're almost presumably the exemplary fathers that are wanting to go to all these things and running into the difficulties. Have you had any sort of attitudes that you've come up against in this? Not just the practical difficulties in work, but people thinking this is a bit strange, or why are you doing this? Shouldn't it be the mother?
Apologies for maybe taking the tone of the committee down, but my wife and I have purposely made a point that when a child needs changed, I'm the one that does it in restaurants. And still, I have to go into female changing rooms. I have to go into disabled toilets. There was no... and I can see the looks that I get when I pick up the changing bag. So...
Anybody else like to? Alan?
I've gone to every group, every class, every provision for baby massage to, antenatal, postnatal groups, and certainly the antenatal stuff is attended very well by couples. It's the postnatal stuff I would say that I was probably in very much the minority and going to lots of these classes and met with shock that, oh, there's a dad here, what's that about?
Sure.
Similar to Alan with the postnatal care, I was refused to go to breastfeeding support sessions run by the health board in my local area. I was point blankly refused to go, so I couldn't offer the support to my wife for that.
We've got Kenny as well.
I was just thinking, I'd attended all the classes prior to children being born, but classes afterwards, and there's quite big issues there as far as postnatal depression and different things that maybe fathers should have a better understanding of. But also, I think fathers are under a lot of pressure in a lot of different ways, and I don't know, I think there maybe could be more done on that aspect of things.
Support Christian.
Thanks, Convener. I like your attitude, Peter. You and your wife are really trying to change the attitude of people, which is fantastic. But you were saying that you're getting some looks. Does your wife get looks as well because she's not taking the kids to get change?
Sometimes, yes, indeed. I feel I'm thick-skinned. I don't care if people want to look. I feel as if I'm doing well. But yes, and people have asked, why are you not doing it?
That's amazing.
Norman, do you want to say something? No?
No.
Okay, then that's fine. John, Victor.
Kind of unique in the sense that I have the children and I have had them since they were, well, my youngest was 1. But I do feel that I'm discriminated against. I can't access so many things because I am a lone dad. And every club that I go to is generally mothers and toddlers, albeit they've grown up a bit. But even now, I do feel that people just stereotyped that's what the woman's role, and I feel that I'm not supported at all.
So where you feel you've been discriminated against?
Well, most recently at the job centre. It's very difficult at the moment for me. The pressure I feel from the job centre, they've suggested that they will stop my money if I don't do more job searches. I'm bringing up 2 children. I'm at college twice a week. I do voluntary work for charities, and you know the pressure there is unbelievable. And they say to me that they have lone parent advisors, but the lone parent advisor doesn't know what to do with me, because most of the jobs are geared up for women that are going to be part-time, that can accommodate me to drop off and pick up my children. And it's just so unfair. And any time they do, they keep pointing me to Mumsnet, but I'm not. You know, I'm not against that at all, but I just often think that if it was the other way about, there'd be a big fight. I mean, Mumsnet's a very good site, and I do use it, and I'm not embarrassed to say I use it, but I've never actually contacted them and said to my dad, but it's a very good site. But I feel everywhere I go, I feel isolated, even in the playground. You know, people look, you know, it's not a nice situation to be in.
Feel so other mums aren't welcoming to you either? You feel isolated from that group of parents as well?
Yeah, that. And I mean, I go on every school trip, but I mean, I've even had children, you know, asking me why I don't work and where's the children's mummy and stuff like that.
Yeah. So can I ask, if you were to find a job, you would then have problems with childcare?
I would have, because of the circumstances of me having the children. We've moved 4 times. In their little lives, and I was working. I tried to keep a job going, but eventually I had to give up work because it just wasn't practical anymore. It wasn't fair on the children.
Remind us how old your children are again?
5 and 6.
5 and 6, yeah, that's fine, thank you. John?
I'd like to go back to something that Peter mentioned there about the health board. Did you make a complaint about that? Did you raise it with anyone at all, Peter?
Yes, we did at the time, but it's still not taken any further.
Yeah. That's interesting, thank you.
Alan, it's you.
Can I just say I've had very similar experiences with Victor, that I take my daughters to dancing, I took them to mums and tums and to baby bounce and all that, and being the only dad in the room, and nobody speaks to you. Nobody speaks to you, not even the people who are taking the class will speak to you. Nobody speaks to you. It's very cliquey with the mums and the leaders and things, and you do feel so out of place. That, well, I shouldn't be here. This isn't for me. This is supposed to be for my wife, who we'd made a decision that I would take them to all those things because I didn't get the baby bit. And you feel really put out, and like I really shouldn't be here. And it's a horrible, horrible feeling. I'm not as thick-skinned as Peter's. I take everything to heart, and it's horrible. It makes you not want to go.
Yeah. And have you continued going to mums and kids?
I've stopped going to the mums and kids ones. I just take my to our own playgroup and to dancing. I don't go to anything else now.
Has any others experienced that as well, with isolation, going along to like other parent events with the children? Yes, Norman.
Yes, I would say that my experiences are quite similar. I've been to the Bounce and Rhymes, or whatever it's called, at the local library, and you do get some strange looks from others, like saying, as if to say, "Oh, why aren't you at work?" or "What are you doing here?" type things. The women tend to be quite cliquey.
Join them for coffee or a blather or a chat or anything like that? No?
Not really, no.
That's sad. Peter and then Kenny.
I know I've brought up the breastfeeding support from the NHS Health Board, but the voluntary group that my wife does attend have been very welcoming and slag me off on a regular basis because I do go, but lovingly, it has to be said.
Kenny.
Yeah, it's different. When our relationship ended, I would do the school run majority of the time. So from not doing the school run, you miss out on the interaction and the sort of all the friends, the networking you've got with the kids and both the families there. And I found that as far as any of the parents from the children I've met with through the school, I'd say very, very few have been in touch with me since we separated. And it's a huge part of your social network. Your life totally changed.
Marco?
There aren't many, but there are some groups targeted mainly at or wholly at dads. Have any of you ever been pointed to one at any point?
Alan and Victor, anybody else? No?
What sort of groups were they?
It was a Gilmerton Children and Family Centre that pointed towards the dad's club. But I had to get 2 buses to get there. It was a bit of a stress. But can I point out that I think that if you have clubs that are going to be for dads and mums, you're never going to go forward. It should be that maybe people would accept dads if, you know, it was a mixed thing. So I mean, there's loads out there. There is stuff out there for dads. But, you know, I think that if it was a more open thing where it'd be mums and dads are welcome, and then it'd be more acceptable for dads to be seen with their children.
Just like mums and toddlers or mum's creche or things like this, change the name so that it's more open to both parents, yeah. I think we've got Christian just now.
Yeah, just you talked about interaction with other mothers. What about interaction with the friends of your children? Do you have the same problem?
For me, I can't. Sorry, I can't hear. You're too far away.
Sorry about that. It's about, you talked about your difficult experience you had when meeting other mothers. Have you got the same difficult experience when you're meeting, if you are meeting, the friends of your children, but for the fathers who've got grown-up children? Do you have that communication with the friends of your children? You know, mothers will interact with other mothers. Their children will interact with their mother's children, and you know there will be a kind of friends, you know, friends of the family, and you will invite them in your house. And do you get that kind of contact with a friend of your children?
Do you have friends that you actually mix with as well that have got children? So you have that kind of social group that you would mix with, or do you still feel you're quite isolated? Yes, Vic, Norman.
I would say that I feel quite isolated. It's hard to have much social contact when you're trying to look after 3 young children. And I've got a son with autism, so there's sort of added responsibilities that go along with that. So it can be quite, you can feel quite socially isolated at times.
And maybe we would direct, do you know any of your children's friends?
Children's friends. Oh, sorry.
I think that the one I struggle with is nobody ever actually comes to my house and my children's friends because I am a lone dad. And I don't know why, but it's frowned upon. I mean, I run a lot of clubs from schools in different areas, and they all know me. The people that know me would come to my house, but the school, you know, like nobody, and it's unfair on my children.
Is any other single parent here or father that watches the kids during the day encounter that same problem as well? Alan?
It's slightly, not just as you were saying, convener, but my stepson, who's 12, coming on 13, his father lives in the next town to us, and he has access to our son, or my stepson, on, you know, a very regular basis, and our communications are very good, and we all got on very well. And he will have sleepovers, and his friends from school go to his father's, come to our house, and certainly him being a lone parent or a lone father with his son there, I don't think there's a major barrier in other children going to that house. I don't know if that's an age situation in terms of he is an older child now, but certainly there's plenty of sleepovers and contact, yeah. Kenny?
I can concur with Victor. It's different. There's different aspects. I've got friends who the children have been born and brought up together, and I've no problems there as far as sleepovers. But for my youngest daughter, she's got close friends that, in a way, you can see why it does happen. Because if I phone up the mother of another saying, "Do your child want to come round when I'm there?" then it might feel really awkward to the husband, or I don't know, but it does cause lots of problems, and it does deny your children an opportunity to network and socialise with their peer group as you would like them to.
Yeah. Can I also ask as well, from the financial aspect of you trying to join clubs and take your children along as a parent on a sort of limited income, if you're a single parent as well and you're not working, Is that a barrier to you actually mixing with other people and your children, interacting with other children as well? Victor, can I ask you that question, please?
It's not really affected me. I'm obviously unemployed now, but before I didn't get involved too much with clubs because we've already discussed that. It was very difficult for a dad to actually go into a club. But now there is a lot out there. If you source it, there is a lot of free clubs. I mean, the only expense I've got is £50 a month, and that's for both the children to do taekwondo. And that's the only one I actually pay for.
Thank you. Can we move back to John? Would like to ask a question about the employers.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we have touched on employers already, but maybe just to do a little bit more on that. I mean, my impression is that we've had a mixture of experiences of employers, some being more supportive than others. And I think when we did the work with women as well, that was also the case. And I had a kind of feeling that maybe, certainly with the women's groups, that the bigger organisations theoretically had a kind of more of a plan in place and were able to kind of cover, whereas smaller employers sometimes struggled a bit more. But I'm just wondering if folk think that, you know, is it just a question of employers' attitude changing? Because from what Alan said, it sounded a bit more like the rules are probably in place, but he was actually discouraged taking his rights. So changing the rules isn't going to do much good in that situation. Or do the rules need to be changed for employers that, you know, government somewhere needs to tell the employers, get your act together? And by employers, I would include the DWP in that, you know, because they're in that work area as well.
Anybody that'd like to answer that question? Alan, do you want to comment? Because you're sitting right beside me, so picking you.
Thanks for that. I don't know if it's a change of the rules that's required, more of a change of the attitude. Because even things like, I've spoke already about me being encouraged to take my paternity during the holidays, but if it was a female, they get to take their maternity and then claim back every holiday that they've missed as a result of taking that. And that's not right, and that it should be so widely different between males and females. So I don't know if it's a change in the rules as such, more as it just needs to be hammered home that it's a change in the attitude, so that we both have rights as parents, so it should be the same opportunity for both.
We change that? I mean, do we need to kind of write to all the schools in Scotland and say, get your act together, or is it just going to change over time, do you think? If we leave it 10 years, it'll be okay?
I don't have an answer. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Question. Okay, right, I accept that.
Christian.
Yeah, come back on this. Is it more about organizations, the employers, or the people who are working there, you know, like your direct manager?
I think for me it's the council, because obviously I work for the council, and it's their rules but obviously implemented by our head teacher, and it's their interpretation of what they can and can't do. So I don't know if it's just because I work in education there's so many grey areas, because obviously we need to have somebody in front of a class. And there's obviously financial impacts and things. So I don't know. It's my sort of general.
Kenny.
A different way. One of my big concerns, or I think affects everything, is the primary carer role. So if the mother's a primary carer, there's a huge draft of things that are all channelled directly to the mother, and the father's excluded from a whole range of things. But and it covers everything: legal, education, the way. I don't know. For me, it covers absolutely everything. The primary carer role.
So again, I mean, how do you think we can change that? Can we do anything, or do we just allow society to change over time?
I think the primary carer role's got to be changed. Why, if we're both parents, you've both got the same concerns, ambitions for your children, so you can't have a mother being able to take responsibility for, or not take responsibility, but my concern area is education with my children just now. But we might be coming on to education, but for me, the primary carer role, it's got to be equal from start to finish. If it's not equal from start to finish, it builds boundaries and barriers.
And sorry to press you, but I mean, do you think that's just a tradition, that that's the way people think?
I think it is a tradition.
Yes.
I think legally there's huge implications there, and it just seems to cover the whole spectrum of all the issues you look at.
I think there's little things that can be done. If you look at any of the sort of leaflets and things you pick up from the doctors, or even when you go to your parenting classes, prenatal and postnatal, it's all pictures of mums with kids. I mean, every single one of them, I struggled to find one that had a positive role for a dad on a picture. So little things like that need to change, because that's embedding the society picture that the mum is the primary caregiver. So I think things like, just little things can start to change, and that way society's impression will start to change.
That's a really excellent visual example of how we can actually change it. Alan, yourself?
Yeah, if I could just pick up on the other Alan's point just there, our experience of going along to the antenatal classes, and the midwife, who was was excellent in all the presentations she gave in the classes that they gave, said, and it stuck with me, that when we had the lesson around feeding, whether it was formula feeding, breastfeeding, whatever way we're going to feed our children, that and her words were, the fathers don't need to really bother about this, because there's plenty for you to be doing at the other end. You'll be changing the nappies. So, very good. Very good. But I just wanted to add that, but I want to pick up on your point, John, around culture and attitudes, I guess, in the workplace. And I think there's two things for me. It's about affordability for workplaces in terms of paternity leave and time off. And I work for quite a small agency who are affected, I guess, by lots of things that are happening in the culture of children's services in Scotland, and local authorities not having lots of money to pay for placements and longer term services for youngsters, so our income's reduced. So the challenge for our organisation is actually affordability. Can they afford to pay enhanced rates for paternity leave, or different types of leave that might be available in the legislation for fathers? But on the other side of that, I've adjusted my hours to look after our two girls on a Monday morning because of the cost of childcare. And so now I work a half a day on a Monday, and the rest of the hours get put into other times of the week. And it's very flexible. It's up to me. Friday I was in Glasgow, so I left the house at 7:30. So there's some time made up, and we just monitor it that way. So I think my organisation's doing what they can, I think, within the resources that they've got available to them. So I think there's a much wider economic argument within it all.
I suspect you're seeing other employers round about, even though you're not actually working for them. I mean, so do you feel other employers are perhaps not as sympathetic as your employer?
Probably not. I mean, I think I have a very good relationship with my employer. I've been with them a long time. They were through the whole journey of our children coming to be in. We had, not that I'm going to go into the details of that, but we had IVF treatment and it took a long time, and our employer was really engaged in that and supported us very, very well in terms of time off for those appointments. We were in and out of hospital 3 times a week, for example, at some points for weeks on end, and so there was no, you'll need to pay that time back. Of course you go, do you need the rest of the day off? Is it too traumatic? Are you all right? That type of stuff. So there was a much longer, protracted situation there. So I think they're probably more sympathetic or more flexible because of the situation, and because they're twins.
Thank you. We'll move on to healthcare and education. Alex, is there any questions you would like to ask?
I'm going to have to pick my way through this because we've been discussing some of these issues already. But the first thing I was going to ask is, do parents effectively use parental leave, or do they share responsibility in a way? Do you find that, how do you decide how you use parental leave or time off work to deal with educational and healthcare issues?
So
is it just something that happens on the basis of need or availability, or is there a plan, or is it accidental almost?
That we just wait and see, it's whatever's happening at the time. My wife only works Sunday and Monday, so she's there the rest of the week full time with our children. So it's much more easy for us to decide how that happens. If it's an appointment where one has to go to the doctor and one's going to stay at home, then I'll make arrangements to come home from work with the support of the employer.
We made the decision really early on that I was going to continue to work, and my wife would, as I said, she left her job and picked up weekend work instead. So Monday to Friday, if there's anything comes up, it's just automatically she does it. That decision was made much, much earlier, so it's not made on a sort of case-by-case decision. We made the decision much earlier that she would be the one that gave up her work to work weekends, so she'd be there Monday to Friday for all those things.
Okay.
I would just concur. It's fluid. You do what you organise. I'm quite lucky. I work from home and organise my diary, but now I'm separated. Again, if you need to do appointments, you get them organised and you do it.
Is that you finished, Ali?
I think we've got through an awful lot of this, but I think there's something I'd like to develop just slightly. You know, this comes from an experience I had. I knew a young man who was a primary school teacher. That was his career of choice, and he actually found himself leaving that profession because he simply did not fit into what was essentially a very female environment. And I'm beginning to get the feeling that there is quite a bit of that going on here. And I want to know if that experience of someone who was on the staff of a school is similar in some ways to the experience that you might have within educational establishments. Is that the case? Do you think men are viewed with suspicion?
My experience with education departments, my children have been out of school for 33 weeks. The BBC, I can remember distinctly that a member of the armed service took his children out for 2 weeks and he was fined £900. My children have been out of school for 33 weeks now. My wife had been turned down by the school group manager on 2 occasions. She appealed to Lothian education departments, turned down, and I'm told there's a loophole in the legislation. And the correspondence, the relationship between the head teachers and school group managers has been excellent. When it comes to getting feedback and basic correspondence from some departments, I find has been embarrassing, to be honest.
Why are you experiencing that difficulty?
Just timelines. I've been asked to phone the Children and Families Department from Midlothian have asked me to phone East Lothian. I've phoned on numerous occasions, not got feedback. It's reverted to solicitors' letters going, and the way, I don't know, I just find it absolutely incredible. And because my wife's a primary carer, and there is this loophole in the legislation, because she's moved from Mid-Lothian to East Lothian, she neither has to be reassessed or the children have to be enrolled in the local primary school. And in this day and age, I find it incredible. If I don't work, I've got to pay the bills. I'm now paying my wife for my children to be out of school. It's just exhausting.
Do you think there's any relevance to the way you're managing your family and your time within that, or is that just a separate problem that's a burden on your mind at the moment?
It's once you're in this position, it's like you can't get out of it. I've worked since I was 16. I put everything into the house, and then you find that it's not the money aspect. Your house is a home. It's a place where you need to have your children. That's my workplace as well. So if you lose that, I went to my parents, and I was staying at my parents for 7 or 8 months. You then find that your children, because you're not a primary carer as well, they're used as tools for manipulation, and it's just a spiral. It's absolutely exhausting. And it's just, solicitors, when you start talking about finances for solicitors, because you're earning, you're caught in a trap there. You're paying money for advice that, quite frankly, I'd rather give it to somebody who's homeless in the street.
Kenny, thanks for that very honest answer to that question. And that really crystallises the difficulty that a lot of single parents actually are experiencing. I was going to ask, but probably it's a sort of rhetorical question, would mothers in the same situation as yourself get that lack of support as well if the father had the children? But
it's a real dilemma, because I was desperate for my wife to stay in the house and for the children to attend school, because they've got the security of the school. And then once the security of the school goes, you then look at new policies that are coming up, like GIRFIC, Get It Right for Every Child, because GIRFIC means that not only the school pick up on problems, but it means the local community pick up on problems. So now my children are out of school, who monitors who? They don't need to be assessed about their education. There's nobody going in. It's just...
the situation you're in just now, you don't have a say whether your children are homeschooled or go to school.
I've been told, I work in health and social care, and I support people in lots of different organisations to make sure they understand and are aware of their responsibilities for reporting on different forms of abuse. And I'm not talking about serious abuse, I'm talking about small things. So it could be coercion or whatever. But if they can't get the fundamentals right about your children being able to be taken out of school when you've gone, I actually agreed for my children to be taken out of school to be homeschooled if my partner would demonstrate an ability, put a curriculum in place, demonstrate an ability, but refused to do that. And the homeschooling network, you find that it's not just me now. You've got this entire network who think that, I don't mind if people want to pay for it, but if they want to do it and not pay for it, then what's the...
It's actually came across quite clearly that you are very limited in what say you actually have now in that situation.
And the school group runner's been excellent. When we're sitting there making the decisions, he said, Kenny, the decision's not made in your interest or your partner's interest. It's made in the best interest of the children. And that's what it should be all the way down. It's not in the mother's interest. It's not in the father's interest. Decisions should be made in the best interest of the children. And I think you need professional people to sit down as a group with parents and work out what's in the best interest of the children. If I go down the legal route, it means I'm now paying half the balance of the house that I purchased in order to maintain the house, but then I'm been told it could cost me £2,000 to get into court plus 10 grand with somebody who I can't agree with on the education, and you're talking about mediation. For me, it's just an absolute shambles, to be honest.
For you, yeah. Thank you very much for that. Alex, do you have anything else you want to ask?
The issue of education, I can't remember, I think it was Victor, it was maybe Peter, it was in the middle of an answer, and you said, we'll maybe come back to education later. And I'd love to know what it was you were going to say. Can you remember?
That's quite unfair, Alex.
Mike.
That's a shame, isn't it? That's a shame. So, I'm assuming, do you have anything else you'd like to say? No. I think Johns would like to ask a question next.
Thank you, Convener, but like a lot of my colleagues, much of what I was going to ask has been covered, and I was going to speak about official attitudes rather than just generally society attitudes. So it would seem to me that certainly with local authorities and health boards, I'm sure who will have wonderful policies, perhaps laminated, pinned to the wall, or certainly gathering dust in a wonderful folder on a shelf somewhere. They mean nothing if they're not put into practice, and I think that perhaps there's a role for this committee to ensure that that is. The other thing is there's clearly a wide range of experiences from the people that we've spoken to here. Kenny mentioned GIRFIC, which is often misrepresented, but clearly if the interests of the child should always be paramount. I wonder if that's featured in any of the issues that have arisen for the other people, indeed if they heard the concept of getting it right for every child.
Is anybody? Peter?
Yeah, well, I'm aware of the GIRFIC legislation, but I've not looked into it in any great detail, but I know that it is there. And I think, as you said, making sure that it's what's best for the child. I felt that with the issues that we were having with the breastfeeding support, that wasn't there. At the postnatal and prenatal classes that I did attend, there was no support for me as a father to support my wife to breastfeed. She had to go through it herself, and there was a lot of questions that I had surrounded it.
Didn't you why that wasn't?
No.
Did you ask?
I did. As I said, no, men don't go.
Right. Sorry.
And that was purely put it down to. I did ask, well, why not? And I said, well, other mothers may not feel comfortable, was what I was told. On occasions, we were told that, no, in order to feed the child, that we had to go into formula. We were told by one nurse, and no qualms about saying this, at Wishaw General Hospital, who had been given a certificate for breastfeeding from UNICEF, that if you do not formula feed your baby, you are starving them.
I mean, clearly there's a challenge here to go too deep into some individual cases. It's the generality. I wonder around the table, and everyone does have different experiences, if you have any involvement with any sort of fathers groups, advocacy groups, and Kenny, you alluded to perhaps there was a networker.
As far as what I find as far as other groups are concerned is, just now my main focus is job, and I've got the kids 3 weekends out of 4. So you find that your energy levels and your ability, I've looked on Fathers for Justice, but for me it's, you've got to put a lot of energy in to find out what you specifically need for certain things. As far as other groups are concerned, just been networking this morning, I've heard of Dad's Rock. I've never heard of that before. But I don't know, maybe because I've not done enough research, but nothing certainly jumped out or was directed to anything. But again, it's you're that focused on keeping everything else going rather than...
We did actually go out, the committee did actually go out and actually go to different fathers groups, which we found really beneficial. And there's a few people here today. Perhaps you could actually give your comments on how you found out about the fathers group and what do you actually get from it. And I think Alan's going to comment on that.
We actually went to a fun day in Hamilton last year, and we were approached by Spell, which is an organisation within South Lanarkshire, about a dads only group, and myself, Peter and Norman all attend, and we actually now run the group. We do that every Saturday, but before that there was nothing. There was nothing that was solely for fathers, and since I've started going to the group, and my kids love it. I love going along and just talking to other dads about their experiences. That's why I now take such an active role in the group. But as I was saying before that, there was nothing. We do get support for the group from the local council, but the group itself is still discriminated against. And that we are the only group that pays a let, for example, for the use of the hall. Mums groups don't. They say it's not discrimination, but I beg to differ. But since I started going to that, both myself, I feel my relationship with my kids is much better, and I now get to see them interacting with other kids, and I get to interact with other dads who've had the same experiences that I've had, and it's just so much better now.
Okay. Can we ask other parents that went to the fathers group what you get from it, Peter?
Yeah, just to echo what Alan was saying, I mean, I go along, there was nothing there, and similar, I found out about it through a poster up in a community centre and went along. I feel I now have a better relationship with my child because I spend that quality time together with her. It was also good for me because I was fairly new to the area, so to get out there and network with other fathers going through the same issues that I had. It's good to have that sort of sounding board. My wife had her support networks through the breastfeeding support group that she went to, but I didn't have that, so it was good to get something for myself as well.
to hear. Norman, do you want to comment as well? You go to the group as well, don't you?
Yes,
yeah.
I also attend the group, and yeah, I find it beneficial to myself because I get to spend some quality time with my children in a safe and relaxed environment, and it's good to meet the other dads in the area because, well, I'm quite new to Hamilton. I've only been there for 2 years, so it's nice to meet new people.
So that's great. Does any other members have any other questions you would like to ask the witnesses today, or do you feel we've covered everything? Marco.
One thing that was briefly touched on earlier, the importance of, I think it was yourself that said it, of granny. Is that something that is widely shared? I need to fall back on extended family, whether that's grandparents, uncles, whatever. I'm seeing nods.
Yeah. Yes, I just, because I don't know a lot of people in the area, I actually rely on my mother to babysit quite a lot, but which is hard because she lives away in Duns in the Borders, so I have to get her up to do that. And my wife's mother lives in the Netherlands, so it's obviously quite hard to get her over this.
Can you just mind the kids for an evening? I'm sorry, I'm in Amsterdam. Yeah.
Similar, like I said before, we could not operate without Granny being close by. It's by having a child, Granny has seen a positive effect on her because she had the long-term sort of health condition, but now she blossoms when she's away. And trying to get her back sometimes is a problem of a Granny, but similarly, financially, we couldn't cope. But now, my mother-in-law is now getting hassle to go back to employment. She is 50-something. I better watch what I'm saying there. And we now have to look at how best that we would deal with that if she did go into employment, because we can't afford or we don't have the means to go part-time with everything that's going on. It's a lot of support that she offers and interacting. And I feel that my child gets more out of not being in nursery, to be honest, because she is interacting. My mother-in-law takes her to places, takes her to museums, Bilco's, soft play, all that. And I think my child has blossomed, but also Granny has blossomed as well.
So that's lovely. Alan?
I mean, we rely very heavily on my wife's mother-in-law, but it's not for childcare, it's for little things. Like, she'll come down in an afternoon to pick my eldest up from nursery, so that it's not a case of having to get my youngest daughter, who's only 10 months, to get her suited and booted to get out to the nursery to pick up my... So it's for little things like that, and it's wee things like that I think make a bigger difference than, you know, watching them overnight, or can you watch them this day while I go... It's the little things, it's the constant little things that I think make a difference.
Christian, then John, then Alan.
As talking about support you get from your own family, I wanted to look a little bit deeper in that relationship, especially family, you know, from other generations. How do they feel about you wanting to be a very active dad, as much as a dad as your partner or your wife or a mother? How do we feel that you want to take such a predominant role in the education and the growing up of your children?
Alan?
I know both my parents and my grandparents find it very strange that I would even consider changing a nappy or taking them to playgroup or things, because that's mum's job. That's mum's job. Why are you doing that? When I was just out shopping with my family, I took my daughter to go and get their nappy changed, and the looks I got from my dad was like, really, she's standing there, why is she not doing it? So it's odd. They look at me as if I'm a weirdo for wanting to take such an active role in my daughters.
Alan as well, and then Kenneth as well. Would like to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say directly the opposite of what you're saying, Alan. My folks and my wife's mother are so encouraging and supportive of the role that I play with my daughters, particularly at the weekends when my wife's working. We call it the Sundays Daddy's Flying Solo Day, and you know, we'll maybe visit my mum and dad or my mother-in-law or whatever, but I would not expect them to change nappies or do anything in that type of role. That's what I do, and they just let me go on with that. My dad would be horrified, I guess, if I asked him to change a nappy, but certainly that's not an issue, and they're very, very encouraging. My mother has said a couple of times, well, you wanted them.
It's your responsibility, Kenny.
Parents have been absolutely amazing with the kids, but as far as nappies are concerned, I know my father, that wouldn't be part of his jurisdiction, but I've been doing it with all three from start to finish, and it's good. It's
lovely to hear.
And going back into this, you know, fulfilling this role of mothers, you know, traditionally mothers fulfill, do you feel a bit different now about the role of women in society, you know, and being mothers or single mothers, for example? Have your attitude changed here?
Certainly in our household, there's a distinct change from how the roles my parents would have played at my age, that it was very job demarcation. There was dad does X, Y and Z, and mum does this. Mum cooks, mum cleans, mum keeps the house, dad keeps the garden and the car and all that type of stuff, and he goes off to work. When my wife and I set up home, it very easily became much more a team situation where I would cook, she would cook, we both would do bits of, in fact she's better at DIY than I am, much better, but we would both share tasks rather than have this job demarcation thing. And I don't know if that's a cultural thing that's changed through generations, or because women are now more in the workplace and more equal in terms of going out to work and status now, whether that's changed that perception. But certainly, and our friends are very much the same. You know, it's a team effort now in households as far as we're concerned.
That's lovely to hear, I think. Yep.
What I've heard today is that the standard everyday support mechanisms for school, for health, whatever, are not adapting to that. Is that the case?
I totally agree that in the household, but certainly with all our friends, everybody, it's expected that it's 50-50, everybody pitches in. As soon as you come out with that, it's very much mum. But certainly within the households, everybody does everything. It's whatever needs done gets done. It doesn't matter who does it. But as soon as you go into the society, as soon as you take them to school or whatever, it's expected that mum is there. And that's the one thing that hasn't changed, I think. Especially, women are now, the role of a woman is identical to the role of a man in the workplace now. They've taken years to get to that. It's just the one thing that hasn't changed yet is this whole mother and father thing in society. Everything else, I think, has changed and is right.
John?
I suppose it was just, if we're kind of heading towards a conclusion, I'm just looking for guidance as to specific things that we should be doing. When I say we, maybe the public sector as a whole or whatever. I mean, we had Alan's suggestion. I think that's one of the most concrete things we've had, but just, you know, things like the leaflets that are produced and so on, that's a way of changing culture. And there's quite encouraging things, I think, we hear around the table about how things have changed a bit. But, I mean, specifically say on the dad's groups, I mean, I think when we were looking for them, actually we discovered there weren't that many around the country, and yet those people that are here are pretty positive about them, and the people we met actually out there were pretty positive about them as well. So, I mean, is that something that we just leave to happen, and maybe it happens in some places and maybe not in others? Or, I mean, is that something, do you think there should be more of a push on, that we should actually be encouraging charities or local councils to really set up these groups and support them, and that would be a kind of focus and a kind of help?
So for those fathers that are not going to the fathers groups, what do you think to that question? Alan?
We are members of the Edinburgh and Lothians Twins and Multiples Club, and they make provision for weekend activities so mum and dad can go along, and you do network with other fathers when you're there. I think if we had had a singleton baby, possibly I would have gone along to a father's group or a drop-in or a something to talk about the issues that do affect fathers, about raising children.
Okay, Alan?
I'd just like to say the other groups that run in the council aren't discriminatory towards just mothers. It's the members that discriminate, and they're the ones that become cliquey. But I mean, they are open to dads to go along. You're not it's not that you're not allowed to go. You don't feel comfortable when you get there, but you are allowed to go. And I think there needs to be a push from somewhere, whether it's from the council, to either start more dads groups or to make it much clearer that, you know, dads are supposed to go. Dads do have a role in these groups as well. I mean, as I say, all the ones I went to, it was me and the mums. So I was allowed to go. I just wasn't made to feel welcome by the leaders or by the mums who were there.
Support, I've forgotten the name of it in South Lanarkshire. Is it a kind of charity that's been kind of supporting the...
It's support for play and early learning in Lanarkshire.
Right.
Is the name of the group, and they run all the sort of book bug clubs, and they do the baby bound. They do a lot of activities in South Lanarkshire for early years education and development, and they support us being the only dads group that they have on their books.
I think there was a woman there from that group when we were at Hamilton, and she seemed very enthusiastic about this and might like to roll it out more.
She is looking at doing more because she's seen the success that we've had at the Family Man Play Group. So she wants to do more.
Yes, but that's having them backing you has been a help?
Oh yes, definitely. I don't think they started the group originally, and we've just sort of taken over from them.
Yes.
Without them doing that in the first place, I don't think it would have happened.
That's interesting.
Can I ask if your group have ever thought of going together as a small group to the mums and toddlers group? So there's like maybe 3 or 4 of you infiltrating the group and seeing if you can sort of break down the sort of boundaries that are actually there. Because if there's more of you, maybe people would feel less awkward in sort of talking to you.
I think it's the timing of the other groups as well, because it is weekday afternoons,
right.
And you know, every one of our dads who's at the groups works. Okay. So we work during the week, so it's very difficult to go and to break that down. I don't know if that's maybe the society thing, that it's the mum that stays at home with the kids, and that's why these groups are for mums. I don't know.
Okay, that's something we need to look at. Marco, and then I've got Christian.
Leaving aside what is expected of you from hospitals, schools, these groups, the councils, employers, do you think that as dads who are actively involved, you are a minority amongst fathers, or a majority, or is it the case that there would be a majority if there were enough services accommodating?
Alan.
I don't think by any means that we are in the minority. I think nowadays every dad who's out there wants to take an active role in the kids and to do all this stuff. There just isn't the provision there for them to do it. I think if there were more groups, if there were more things geared at dads, then we would become the majority. I don't think for a second that we are the only dads, or the very few dads in the country that want to take such an active role in their kids.
Peter.
Yeah, I think there's this silent majority. I think there has been a change in mindset that men are taking on more roles within the house and supporting their children. I think personally, it's down to the information getting out there. If I didn't see that leaflet or that poster in the community centre that day, I wouldn't have known that the group is on. I think there's John was saying about what can you do from sort of the government's point of view. I'll mention the white elephant that's in the room. These groups don't work in fresh air. They need to have the resources put into them. Alan has explained we are the only group that pay the let for the hall. That is a big aspect. Yes, we take money and we do fundraisers, but obviously we need to get that support.
Can I just say I did quietly say to Alan I would have a look at that and come
Thank
back
you.
to you, it's no problem. Anybody else like to comment? I've got Christian waiting to ask a question, but are we happy to move on? Christian.
Thank you very much. No, I did like your suggestion, Covina, about trying to break down barriers, but maybe we're not ready yet. Maybe what we need is to have more groups like yours. I was just thinking about this idea of the barriers between genders. And we're talking about the consequences, in everyday's life. But what about what is the cause? Is the cause come from the education of our own children? Are we trying to, the first toy we buy to our children will be, for a girl will be a doll, or for a boy will be something different? What do you do in your own group?
Peter.
I'm not sure about anybody else, but I can certainly say that my daughter, when she goes to the group, first thing she goes to is the ride-on tractor. And I know that a couple of the boys, the first things that they go to is the doll. And that may be because they don't have that at home, because there is this gender stereotype, or that may be that's just what they want to play with.
Should be an action on this as well.
I know that a few pressure groups have been looking into sort of gender-specific branding of toys. Like you go into Hamleys or whatever, and it's now not, that's the pink section and that's the blue section. So I know that small drips are sort of happening in that case. I think it's just keeping that fight going.
Can I just also say, put on record, my grandchildren, I don't buy my granddaughter a doll or a cookery set. I make sure I buy her educational toys, and she absolutely loves them. And the dolls that she's got, she never plays with.
Anybody else? Any other parents want to comment?
No? No. Well, can I thank everybody for coming along today? The information you gave us has been really, really interesting. And I think your children are very, very lucky and fortunate to have such loving parents. And for you to take the time to come today, we really do appreciate it. So I'd like to sort of say this concludes our today's meeting. And our next meeting will take place on Thursday, 13th of March. And will include further oral evidence on our inquiry into fathers and parenting. And thank you again for coming. Thank you. Close.
Thank you.